Hello and welcome to November with the Bike Show, and to an episode in which we'll be celebrating the best of South African motorcycling passion, ingenuity and engineering know-how as we meet some guys with a plan to build from scratch their own 500cc two-stroke to take on the roof of Africa and then the high speeds of the Bonneville Salt Flats in the quest for a new world record. Before that though, we're going to try and catch up with the deluge of news updates arriving in the final days of the build-up to the all-important EICMA International Motorcycle Expo. There's so much going on that we'll have to spread our coverage over several upcoming episodes, and we can only begin with the very busy chaps at Ducati. Well, there's been a whirlwind of announcements at the Italian manufacturer, and not your usual type of stuff like a special edition model with a suede seat or an updated electric mountain bike or yet another new version of the Multistrada. Oh, yeah, wait, there is one of those, the details of which are coming up, but I will say I really want one, despite its hefty price tag, and BMW also releasing a very similar machine with even more horsepower. Okay, take a breath and let's start with MX bikes. Yep, you heard me right. After Triumph's announcement last year that it was aiming to go racing at the highest levels with the help of such dirt racing luminaries as Ricky Carmichael, we now have the factory from Bologna taking up a similar challenge with the help of Italian MX legend Tony Cairoli, who of course gained his multiple world titles in the orange colours of KTM. Still, can't blame him for answering the call of a home factory for a project as mouth-watering as this. Remember, after all, that this is a motorcycle company that is about to win its second consecutive MotoGP World Championship, and will probably take second and third in that championship as well. On top of which, it has just secured a second consecutive World Superbike title in the hands of Alvaro Bautista, while Nicola Buliga has taken the World Supersport title. Oh, and arguably the most competitive of the planet's national Superbike championships has also been won by a Panigale in the hands of Tommy Bridewell in the UK. On top of this veritable mountain of racing success, Ducati has also, remember, been busy using racing competition to develop its inevitable entry into the electric bike market after having taken over supply of the machines used in the Moto E Championship. This is a company that has undoubtedly got racing in its blood and firmly believes in this path to commercial success. Given that it is selling more bikes than ever and is more profitable than it's ever been, it would be difficult to argue with the approach. With this history of racing success, it's something of a major, huge announcement even, that it now intends doing the same thing with motocross. And although details are thin on the ground at the moment, we do know that a Ducati prototype will be racing in the Italian Championship in 2024, and that its engine, like all the others that it campaigns around the world's racetracks, will use desmodromic valves. Staying with the desmodromic theme, Ducati also revealed that it has now created what it is calling the world's highest revving and most powerful single-cylinder motorcycle engine. Performance bike enthusiasts may not be blown away by this news, and if you're a superbike or super naked fan, then I can sort of see where you're coming from. I used to feel very much the same way, but then I grew up in an age where larger capacity singles were known as thumpers for good reason. But then back in the late 1990s, when I moved from a South African bike magazine to become eventually the road test editor at Superbike magazine in the UK, I got the opportunity to ride my first KTM Duke featuring the LC4 single-cylinder engine, and I immediately became a fan of what a sorted single-cylinder engine could actually offer. The bike was huge fun, much of that down to the chassis, but most of it a result of the 620 single-cylinder motor, or was it 640 by then? My memory fails me. Lightweight, super punchy throttle response, modest but entirely usable power. I was hooked. When it finally graduated a few years later into the 690, I was unapologetically addicted to the thrills of KTM's incredibly smooth, powerful, characterful single that worked as well on the road as it did in the dirt. This was deservedly now a legend of an engine, and if you've never experienced the different, slightly unusual thrills of a high-revving single, I would recommend that you get yourself a test ride and see for yourself. After holding the crown of best single for so long, I can guarantee that there's already a response to Ducati's new Super Quattro engine being tested in Austria as we speak. But it appears that Ducati will own the new single-cylinder bragging rights when the engine debuts in a new model, awkwardly just after we hand in this programme, but also just before it airs on the channel. Don't worry though, we'll bring you news of what that model is in next week's episode, although rumours have it that it will be a motard of some description. Ducati fans and those of us of a certain age will remember that the Italian firm actually has some history with singles, with the limited edition 550 Super Mono named after the class in which it raced. Only 65 of those were ever built, and I know that one is actually in Joburg at the BST factory where it sits proudly, or at least it did the last time I went there, in the reception. That engine inherited many of its features from the 888 race bike of the time, and a similar influence can be seen in the new 659cc engine that uses technology borrowed from the last of the 1299 Panigalis. The Super Quattro name for the engine means super square, or as we would say, over square, with the same fat piston from the V-twin running with a stroke that is barely any longer. You therefore have a single cylinder unit that will rev to a record setting 10,250 RPM and pump out 78 horsepower, a number that jumps up to 85 horsepower with the Race Terminoni exhaust fitted. Contrary to what you might expect from such a high-revving engine, there is a very wide spread of torque. So with the impressive peak numbers comes an even more useful level of usable grunt from pretty low in the rev range. You'd have to think that this would be especially useful, not just for the rumoured motard-styled first model, but what should inevitably be an accompanying range of enduro and street models in the not too distant future. I am really looking forward to experiencing what promises to be the new benchmark single-cylinder engine, almost as much as I am the latest, spiciest version of Ducati's Multistrada V4, the RS. Given how brilliant is the standard 170 horsepower Multi V4, both as a touring bike and more than capable sport bike, and then further given how the true sport bike junkie was catered for with the Pikes Peak edition of this model, you could argue that Ducati already had all the bases covered in terms of the larger of the two multis. Except motorcycling these days often seems to be about marketing, niche filling, catering to the really wealthy and showing off how much and how advanced and how sporty even an ostensibly touring bike can be made. And although I'm usually prone to outbursts of grumpy sarcasm with such models, I am uncharacteristically going to be lenient with the horribly expensive RS. Yes, that is a biased opinion, and although you get a 17-inch front wheel, revised geometry to account for that change, and most importantly a slightly softer tune from the Panigale sourced engine, that still means 180 horsepower in a bike that you can spend all day riding without needing to overdose on painkillers just to get back on it the next day. A 180 horsepower touring bike with the best superbike electronics package, absolutely top-notch brakes and suspension, and a host of other sport bike components with a price of over 700,000 rand is more than a bit silly, I know. But for once, I don't care. I still really want one. Lots of news from Ducati to start this week's episode, but stay with us because coming up we have the inspirational story of some South African engineers who are dreaming big, really big.